Welcome to the Pastor and Intern podcast with Pastor Eric Dyer, Intern Will Emery, and Content Lead Kayla Popwell. So, Eric, I have some good news and bad news. Which one do you want first?
Give me the bad news.
Okay, bad news is that our Content Lead, Kayla Popwell, cannot be with us today.
Man, she is the star. She is the calling card.
She's made the podcast even better. She has some prior obligations. We still love her, but she is not with us. So the good news, though, is that there's someone to take her spot today.
Oh, okay.
So someone that means a lot to both of us, Miss Jeanne Crawford.
Wow, the legend herself.
I mean, I'm telling you,
sitting across from us. Man.
How she gave up time to come join us.
Honestly,
I have no idea.
That's the best thing that she does. She
really
gives up her own time.
Somehow spent a whole week with us, and now she's
back again.
Back here with us.
Yeah, I know. It's
she can't
crazy.
get enough with it.
Yeah, she didn't know she was getting into this, I don't think. No, not at all. So, Jeanne, I just have a couple questions for you. We thought that you were the perfect person to bring on the podcast because you selflessly serve the church, specifically in youth ministry because you teach Sunday school, you taught for us on Sunday nights, you go to all the trips. We just got back from Centrifuge, not Infuge, Centrifuge, going back to Infuge, and you do all this stuff. And so I thought that it would be fitting for you to be on the podcast because you serve the church just as much as I do. And so we thought it would be good to get a church member's perspective just on life about how serving in the church is, how do you wrap your mind around how you serve the church, things like that. Before we get to the church part, just kind of give us a little snapshot view of your testimony real quick.
When I was 21,
mm-hmm.
My husband had met someone, and they continually came to our home every Tuesday night.
Okay.
I always say rain, sun, shine,
okay.
snow. They
all
came.
All right.
And they were concerned about my salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And I held on that I was good, and that's all I needed to be. And
sure.
so through those Tuesday night discussions, I realized that good was not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finally accepted the Lord, and then we were baptized.
Wow. That's pretty cool. So had you been baptized previously?
No.
No? Okay, cool. So what have you done since then? So since that moment, what have you done since that moment till now as far as your ministry? Like, what have you been participating in?
For a long time, I was just a parishioner.
Okay.
Just part of the church. I'm not really serving in any place. Once we moved to Blackshear, we started serving in the youth, doing ministry there. I felt the call into missions. And so when we were at our other church, I took kids on mission trips and did different things like that because I felt like God was calling me into missions.
Sure.
Shortly thereafter, we joined First Baptist.
It's a good choice, by the way.
Yes,
yeah,
good choice.
I agree.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. I agree. So it was joining choir. I didn't think I would go back into the youth ministry. At that time, I was invited to do kindergarten.
Okay.
So I taught kindergarten for a couple of years.
There's really not a big difference.
No, there's not. There really is not. And then I was asked to go back and teach the middle school girls.
Okay.
And so I've been doing that. I'm part of choir. I serve on some of the boards here, CWJC, Christian Women's Job Corps. Serve on that board. I also serve on the Sycamore Tree, another benevolence committee here that was birthed out of our church. I sing in the choir.
Okay.
I really just make a joyful noise.
Hey.
But
whatever you got. Whatever the Lord wants. Whatever you got.
Right.
And so now church is where I cling to the church.
Okay. So you say you've been on mission. Where have you been on mission?
I have been to Peru.
Ooh.
Down the Amazon. That was my first one.
Wow.
Down the Amazon.
Yeah.
You went big.
I was like, man, my first mission trip was in Kentucky. not the Amazon River.
Yeah. I've been to northern Ecuador twice.
Okay.
I've been to the jungles of Ecuador, which was very different, very trusting on the Lord because I do not like to be dropped off anywhere.
Right.
and the Ecuadorian military dropped us off at the beginning of the jungle. And the only thing we had were the things on our back, and they said they would meet us in a week. And
Wow.
That is crazy.
off we went.
Wow. Oh, my God.
How did you travel in the... You just walked every...
Did you have like a machete and you like hacked away like Indiana Jones?
No, we walked most of the time. Sometimes we took a boat across, but we didn't know where we were going to be the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So we had no facilities. We slept on floors of classrooms or wherever we could find a place.
Yeah.
We took a bath in the river.
Wow.
And watched people go and get their food. But we ate what we took in,
mm-hmm.
and we had our sleeping bags and everything in our backpack. And so it was a very trusting.
That sounds about right.
Right.
I've been to South Africa twice and worked in their schools. My husband and I thought that that's where the Lord was calling us to go to South Africa, but He did not. And I've been to California several times. I've been to Tennessee and just did local missions.
Okay. So basically what you've told me, let me get this straight, is that you're an active participant in church ministry, right? So boots on the ground at the physical church location.
Yes.
Right, okay. So I also know that you help us with college students.
Yes.
On, is it Tuesday nights?
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday nights. This is summer, so I forgot.
Yes.
Tuesday night, so you do that. You also help in the youth ministry specifically. Okay, so you teach 6th through 8th grade girls, and you have like 20 of them, and it's ridiculous. You've got the biggest room in the house.
Yes.
And apparently you and Bethany are rock stars. I mean, I feel like that's the only possible reason why you have so many.
How long have you been teaching Sunday school, though?
For the middle school?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly 10 years?
Man.
If not longer.
Yeah, so you've seen a lot of your kids grow up, graduate,
yes.
leave. Have you seen any get married? Is that past your 10-year mark, or?
No, they're probably of marriage age, but they have not gotten married yet, and they haven't had children yet.
Gotcha.
Right.
So would you agree that how you find out if you're called to youth ministry is teaching 6th through 8th graders?
Definitely.
Okay, yeah. I feel like that's the modern consensus.
Yes.
When I worked at the church in Tennessee, I was the Sunday school teacher for the we didn't have 6th graders, we just had 7th and 8th graders. And there were so many co-leaders that I had that left. Like they were always like, "Hey man, this is great, but I think I'm done." But I was all the one to stick with it, not to toot my own horn or anything, but it really affirmed in my heart that this is what I was supposed to be doing. Because if you can put up with the 7th grader, the 12th grader's not so bad.
Right.
You know. So you teach Sunday school.
Yes.
So not only do you do all those things, sing the choir, teach, all these things, okay? I'm really pumping up your ego here, by the way.
I hear that.
Yeah,
I
okay.
hear that.
So not only are you doing that, but you also are going on mission. So you've also been to half a dozen places, if not more.
I think you've been on every mission trip I've ever been on. I think you've been on. We went to Mexico, you were there. Both my California trips, you were there. So, yeah, you...
So just a quick question, and this is just for me personally, not for our audience. What's harder, going on mission or going to Fuge?
I'll say going to Fuge.
Wow.
I think when I go on missions, though, I've gone on faith and trust more.
Okay.
So I do things that I probably would never do here on American soil because I know the Lord has taken me and that He's provided everything to get me there. And so, I don't know, it's just trust and faith. And camp is good, but I don't know, I just feel like the Lord's there with me in the midst.
Yeah, it's just different, right? Like
different.
When you're on mission, you're like boots on the ground, you're doing the work. But when you're at camp, it's not like you're not doing anything, but you're more there as like a advisory role, you know?
Right.
Like that's what you're there for. Like even me, and I had conversations every night. Like last year's Fuge was not like this. This year's Fuge, I had 3 conversations every night with different students. And I felt like I really didn't do much all day until after church group time. So they're definitely different.
They're different.
They're definitely different.
Well, and I think the coolest thing for me to see is because I've seen you in both aspects. and to see how you interact with people is what. So like you could tell us what lunch and dinner was every day last week at Fuse, just because you were so intentional with the lady who works in the cafeteria.
And you did it with grace.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, hey friend, what's for dinner? And I'm like, this is amazing. Like,
and that's something I would have just waited and seen, but it's really cool to see you interact not only at Fuge but also on mission trips with the people. I think you just have that gift to be able to talk and interact with people.
Right.
Well, and I'm a school teacher, and I do it at school as well. With the custodian and the lunchroom staff, I'm always very intentional about talking to them and knowing what's going on in their lives.
So now that you brought that up, what is your profession? What do you actually do? I
am a special education teacher.
Okay.
I've been teaching for 20 years.
Wow.
And I always say I have the best job because I teach in an elementary school. So I work with children pre-K to 5th grade.
Okay.
And I get to watch them grow. Right. And so when that teacher says later on that they can't do anything or they're frustrated with them, I know where we've been and how far we've come.
Right.
And so it allows me to have relationships with my students as well as their parents.
Right.
And so I feel like there's that trust there. And so I can almost say anything. By the time they get to 4th and 5th grade, my students have trust me and their parents trust me. And so I can make those decisions that impact them educationally.
Right. Because, I mean, from just like a big picture point of view, it's so much easier to talk to a student when you've known them for 4 years.
Right.
Like it and it's the same thing with ministry. I mean, it's easy to come in your first month and be like negative Nancy and no one's listening to you. Nobody cares what you think. But then in year 2, it's almost different because you've seen these people grow. They're taller than they used to be. They know more than they used to be. You have a better relationship with their parents.
Right.
And that's really cool. And I feel like that helps you in ministry, like you're a teacher, you deal with these people all the time. Because we talked on the trip, and you expressed to me that the harder relationship is with the parents, than it is with the kid. So you're not just talking with children, but you're talking to their parents too, and you've expressed some of the weird dynamics and. And even the adults you work with, like you're working with a vast number of people,
Right.
And so I feel like teachers get a bad rap sometimes because like, well, they just go and they do recess all day with children. It's like, no, actually, that's not what they do. They actually deal with you. They're actually dealing with you and your junk. That's just the way it is. So now that we kind of know you, we know, and the audience knows you. Just give us some perspective on what it looks like to be a church member. Because there's like this, in the past 5 years, there's been all these books written about church membership. They just have been. And even if they're not explicitly about church membership, they have church membership in them as a main staple of Christian life. And I know on this podcast we don't worship works. On this podcast, we just don't. We're open about how we're not legalistic. We're not moralistic people. But we would also say on the podcast that we believe that if there has been true life change in your life, works will be there, right? So in your life, what in your mind makes a good church member?
In my mind, I would say just loving on people. Mm-hmm. People have loved on me during the hardest times of my life. Mm-hmm. And have been there for me. And so it's just loving on people. I'm a greeter. I just started that.
Ooh.
And I love it. Mm-hmm. And it's just welcoming people into the church. But I think it's just letting others know and to see God's love. Mm-hmm. And having that discussion with people and then being very intentional about what they told you, whether it's been about doctor's appointments and then just following up and just letting people know that you care. And I don't know, I just being a part of a corporate worship where you come together and worship with people. But then what I like about First Baptist is there many ministries. And so you find the things that interest you. Mm-hmm. that you feel you have a gift for. And so you see different people. And because I do Bible studies, I teach middle school girls, I'm part of Faith Riders, different things. I get to interact with different people and just knowing that they care about me, but knowing that I care about them. And so we get to show God's love in all of those aspects.
Right. Well, I really like how you made the point, follow up with, because I think kind of the idea that we have sometimes is that I'm only a church member when I'm at church. Right, so on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night is the only time that I'm in that member role. But if I see you out at the grocery store, I like that idea of follow up, because if I see you out in the grocery store, then I'm going to ask you about those things that you brought up to me. How is it going? How is that? And so I think that's another good characteristic, as you mentioned, of a good church member.
It's the truth, because I remember, because we do prayer requests on Wednesday nights. And so we have students that'll either share out loud or they'll come up to me and say, hey, this is a prayer request I have. If you please pray for it or put it on the prayer list or whatever. And I had a young man come up and tell me that his brother was in the military, he was going to Japan, and that he was really worried about it because it's just a bunch of unknown. And then because of that conversation, because that's like something you don't forget. Right? Because I'm horrible at forgetting. And so ever since then, almost every week, I'm like, hey, man, how's your brother doing? When's the last time you talked to your brother? How's he like in Japan or whatever? And I agree with that. Like, there's so much more than just showing up. Like, it's like a community. Yeah. It is a gathering of people that love each other and want to be there for each other. So, as a church member, just imagine that you interact with somebody that doesn't go to church. Okay, claims to be Christian, all that stuff. What would you tell them that they're missing out on, as far as the local gathering and the local service of the church?
They're missing out on the community part of it, the love part of it, the feeling as you belong somewhere, the love of people.
All right.
We're not meant to be in isolation or private worship. We're meant to be among God's people and loving on that. So I think you miss out on that if you're not a part of a local church.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I think the majority of those people would say, well, you guys are just a bunch of judgmental hypocrites.
Yeah, right.
And so it's funny to hear, which I completely agree, is that in reality, we're not. We're called it's the one another's, right? We're called to love one another, encourage one another, and build each other up and help you continue your walk. Our goal is not to tear you down.
Right.
And so I agree.
And when I think about this question, there's so many dynamics that come up, because I've had this conversation with several people in my life. And so my next question for you, and I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot with all these questions, so I apologize. But, we do things right here on the Pastor and Intern.
That's right.
So in your mind, if you're having this conversation with somebody, what do you think that they feel like they're risking by trying to leave their isolated state and be part of a body of believers? What do you feel like is quote unquote on the line, or things that they might harbor to themselves that they love? What are some risks for people?
Showing that they're human, that maybe they have some hurts, some scars in their lives, and maybe they feel like that will come up. I think they're putting themselves out there for relationships that maybe they will like it. I've had a friend that came to church and didn't like what had been said that day as far as the sermon, and she's never come back. But her thought was she didn't want to go to heaven with all the sinners, not ever looking that she was a sinner as well. She just looked at it as, if murderers are going to be there or whoever's going to be in heaven, she didn't want to be a part of that. And so I think it's just putting yourself out there.
Right.
And seeing that people do care. Maybe that's not what you want. You want to be by yourself, and
it's easier, right?
Yeah, it's easier.
Like, it's easier to be by yourself because there's no accountability, there's no risk, there's no uncomfortable, there's nothing like that. Because when you're by yourself, you can do what you want to do. You can talk to who you want to talk to when you want to talk to them. Because the reality is, and we've talked about this before, is like we live in a society that's so connected, but it ends up making us disconnected because of that ease of access. Like I can go to church from my couch if I want to, and I can tithe from my couch if I want to. Not that any of that's bad on a rainy day, but in general, I think we would all agree that you need to be connected and plugged in to local church. So, kind of wrapping up here, what would you encourage someone to do if they want to be more active in a church? Like, where do they start? Where do they look? Who should they go to? What should they do?
First, you have to find you a good Sunday school class.
Okay.
Attend a Bible study. Find somebody that's, I'll say, in your part of your life, whether you're a young family. Look at your deacons, if you know who those are. But find the people that have some of the same interests as you, that can help you get plugged in. But then you have to find the things that you're interested in as far as in the church and the way to serve there as well.
I think that's the hardest part. Because I feel like a lot of us that do take that step go into a Sunday school class. They get plugged in with a group. They come to church. They drop their kids off at kids programs. They come to parent stuff. They do that. But then it's the next step in finding out what you're good at.
Right.
So how do we do that? Like how do we look inside of ourselves at moments and figure out, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I should do. This is what I'm good at. How do we figure that out?
Sometimes it's looking at what you do as a career choice. Lately, I have a grandson that's autistic, and I now see why God put me in special ed, and I can help him navigate that. And so now I bring some expertise, hopefully to the church, to help other church members understand how to work with a special needs child. So sometimes it's looking at those things that you have are strengths. I've seen those that are in the finance world that they're able to kind of help navigate into that, kind of helping with the money part of it. Sometimes it's just maybe you aren't a teacher, but you get asked to go into a teaching role, and maybe you're the organizer for that, or help in those kinds of areas. Or maybe you like to cook at home, then you kind of get plugged into the kitchen area.
Right.
And so there's lots of different aspects. And I think a church, especially as large as ours, lends itself to many ministries. And so you kind of just start looking at the things going on, and I'll say look at the first word of some of those things, and just sometimes it's needing an invitation. So it's the church being aware that you're there and inviting you in, or just showing up and, you know how to say you want to do hands to work or whatever.
Yeah.
And to help there.
Well, I think a lot of times in church, we train people to take what they learn from the church and apply it to their actual life. And very rarely do we take our actual life and what we're good at and apply it to the church. Because I feel like we talk about how do we bring the gospel to your workplace? How do you talk to people about the gospel? How do you evangelize? How do you go on mission where you're at? Things like that. But how rarely do we go, okay, so what do you do in your day job?
Right.
Okay, so how could that skill help you in a church setting? I feel like we love to push the gospel out, which we should.
Right.
But how do we help the local body with our own skill set? And I don't think that's arrogant or anything. It's just like, hey, this is what I do. Just let me do what I do and I'm good at, and let me have some joy through the Spirit in what I do, outside of just making money.
Right.
So just to wrap up here, and Will has no idea this is coming, because this is just how we do things. So Will, why don't you just tell the audience what you think of Jeannie? What she means to you?
Well,
why don't you just do that?
I planned on that. Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Before, because I think it's important, and it's even something I want to hear answered. But I think it's safe to say that you've been through some pain in your life, some heartache, some heartbreak with your husband and things of that nature. We don't have to get into that, but how? Because and this can go into my response to that, but when I look at you, I see someone who is strong in the faith, wants to read their Bible more, wants to serve, wants to encourage others. How in the world did you still end up at that point through the stuff you've been through? How did you? Because I think most people, they go through hard times and then they get mad at God. They're angry. They walk away from the church. They think, I don't want anything to do with this anymore. How are you still here?
I'm going to say one thing and then I'll go into another.
Great.
When my husband passed away over 5 years ago, somebody told me that I just had to breathe. That was all that was expected of me. And so that's all I did. And that's all I do for each moment is all I do is breathe. It's interesting that you asked me that question because it's probably the last 2 or 3 months since we've been doing Just Open the Door by Jen Smith. It's made me go back and look at the things that my husband and I did, and I'm not sure how we got involved in some of those things. But we've had people, I'll call them foreigners, but they weren't foreigners, but people that were not in our family come and live with us at 2 different times. We've been involved with a home that had special needs men, and we ministered to them and had them to our home and did baseball games with them and things like that. And I just keep looking at the things that my husband and I did together and the impact that it's made on my life now. And as I wait for the Lord to tell me where I'm supposed to go next, I just keep reaching back for all those experiences that we had, that we loved. On the least of these, we've had Bible studies in our home that for a while was just college students. And then it was just mismatched people that just came together at our house to just love on the Lord and to share the Lord with them and to share a meal. And so I just look at all of that and I just keep plugging along. It's just, I don't know where the Lord's taking me next. And I think I ponder on that a lot, is where do I go from here? But then I've just also been reflective a lot about the things that He's had me do in the past. And where will He take me based on all of that?
That's awesome.
That's pretty good. It's a pretty good answer.
Yeah, that was a pretty good answer.
All right.
So I would, to answer Eric's question, I said from the in pulpit, I know you remember this, a couple years ago, we got back from California. It was either California or Mexico, I don't remember. And I was, thinking the leaders who went with us, and your name was obviously one of them because you were on every trip I ever went on. And I called you my mission trip mom because you've been on all the trips I've been on. Right. And I still mean that to this day. You still go on every trip I go on. But the cool thing is that I get to see it now from 2 different perspectives. Right. So I was at once that kid that you poured into, that you loved on, that made me want to come back. And I also get to see it from a leadership, quote unquote, I'm just the intern, but from a serving position of how willing you are to do absolutely anything to serve, not only serve us and the students, but to serve God in any aspect. From, as we've already mentioned, you work with students and Bible studies and all these different things. You're a greeter, and that's encouraging for me to see, because it makes me want that when I'm where you are. And I've seen you walk through these difficult things. And again, I look at you and I'm just so encouraged, and it makes me want to continue to stay steadfast in my faith and things of that nature. And so before I start crying or anything, I appreciate you way more than you know. I love you to death and would do anything for you. And I'm thankful for all that you've done for me.
You're getting ready to make me cry.
I know.
That's as far as I'm going to go.
But I think that's a beautiful picture of the church, though, right? Like, how often does someone be poured into, and then that person grows up just a little bit, and now they're not in youth anymore, and now they're helping plan the events that you're going on, and now you're kind of ministering together with people? Like, that is such a beautiful representation of how the church is supposed to work.
Right.
Like we get this picture that, okay, you're going to train them up, you're going to send them out. It's like, okay, well, maybe, but a lot of the time, especially in a community like this, like Pierce County, the likelihood of that person being with you for a long time is high,
Right.
And so for y'all to be together and then continue to be together in ministry is a pretty great picture. So I've not lived here that long. I just really haven't. I'm just now getting to the point where I feel comfortable in my own skin around every single person in the church. And I remember when I first got here, there was a lot of uncertainty. No one really knew what they were doing, including me. But one of the easier parts of my job was Sunday school, because the reality is I didn't do anything. I only do something in Sunday school when somebody's not there, and I can't find somebody to replace them. And I don't know that I could track the 52 weeks of the 2 years, because it's almost been 2 years since I've been here, but you might have missed 1 week. Like, that is
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah.
Like, that is outrageous, you know, because if I'm doing that, I'm like, man, like, which week am I going to strategically not
Right,
be teaching
right,
these 6th,
right.
7th, and 8th graders? But on a serious note, you know, you've been on every trip I've been on. You have always tirelessly and faithfully worked. I don't know that I've ever heard you say the word no, ever. I don't know that it's even in your vocabulary as far as we're concerned. I've never seen you be caught off guard by something or a conversation or hardship or a task. I've never seen that. I've never seen you back down from what was the right thing to do. I've never seen you cower away from the moment when you were going to speak and you were going to say something. You know, and I'm just impressed by you and motivated, and you know, there's just not, and I don't have a problem saying this, there's just not many people like you.
No, I agree.
I've worked in youth ministry for, let's see, this will probably be 6 years, and there's not many leaders like Jeanne Crawford. I can just tell you.
No.
I've seen too many come in and out, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But when it comes to faithfulness, I feel like you've been extremely faithful, and those girls that you minister to specifically love you, and now you have some older girls that you poured into that love you too. And especially coming back from camp, and you're all just laughing and carrying on and being together, it's just I just feel like it's what God intended. Not very many things in this life are what God had intended this place to be. But you make something that is hard and takes blood, sweat, and tears into something beautiful. And so I really appreciate
We
that.
couldn't do what we do without you.
No,
We really
Let me
couldn't.
reiterate that.
Yeah.
I do not do everything
Right.
in the youth ministry. I try to put it on and let other people do it, and so you do it well. And so, and I know Will's saying, "Sway, we just want to thank you for
Yeah, we're thankful
all you're
for you.
doing, and we want people to know what you're doing, because you're not going to go to the mountaintop and say, "This is what I'm doing." No,
Yeah.
that's not what you're going to do. You're going to just faithfully trudge along and breathe and move on with your life. And I feel like people need to know it, not to make anybody feel good or anything like that, but to encourage the kingdom and push people forward that are
Right.
serving in the church. So anyway, Jeannie, thank you for being a
Yeah,
part of our
thanks for being
podcast.
here
You're
today.
the best.
Thank you.
You're the best. We got VBS this week,
Yep.
and when you
Camp
know it,
last week. It's
yeah, I know. Spoiled,
been-
like shocker here, but Jeannie's doing missions at VBS. That's a big
Yeah.
shocker.
Right.
I'm about to fall out of my seat. I'm so
Wow.
shocked. But anyway, this isn't the last interview we'll have. I don't know if any of them will be this good, but this will not be the last interview that we have. So anyway, we're going to do our outro. So as always, I just want to thank all the people that listen to this podcast. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do this. There wouldn't be anybody to share our message with. We always want to thank our church. We love FBC and everything they do for us.
Yeah, since our content lead isn't here, I'm going to have to do her part. I'm not going to do it well enough.
That's
but,
okay.
you know.
It's all right.
So if you're not already, please leave a rating or review on your podcast app of choice. Hopefully this will get our message out to more people. As always, make sure to check out our new Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I say new. They're really not new anymore. They've been there for a while.
They're seasoned.
To get up to date on all things that deal with the podcast. By the way, even though Kayla's not here, we are really thankful for her doing those.
We are, dude.
Keeping up
She
with
is
social
hard.
media.
She's working hard.
Yeah, she's doing a really good job. So maybe you don't know either, but there's a big meeting going on right now in Birmingham,
Ooh.
Alabama.
If not for VBS, that's where I would be.
Yeah, we would be there. So next week, that's what we're going to be talking about, is the Southern Baptist Convention, what happens at that meeting, what they decide on different things. It's a very important meeting, and so be looking out for that. We are for the Word, for the truth, and for the church. Thanks again for listening to the Pastor and Intern podcast.